Hello, everyone. It is good to see you. It is Friday, which means it is another Ask Me Anything session here at Experience Investigators. I am Jeannie Walters. I'm thrilled that you're joining us today. We're going to be talking about how to prioritize your customer experience efforts. And that is something that I've seen a lot of leaders struggle with. So, my hope today is to give you some tools and that you can use right away. Now, as always, we want your questions. Feel free to drop into the chat. Let us know, not just about questions about this topic, but anything you want to throw at me around customer experience. We will be discussing that after going through a brief presentation. But for now, as always, we have with us David Hornreich, our Director of Marketing. David, how are you?
I'm well. Summer finally decided to happen in Seattle. The rain has stopped, and so enjoying the sunshine and,
Excellent.
and the Friday. Yeah,
We've had a little too much summer already in Chicago.
I've
We've had
heard. Yeah,
very hot, humid days and then a few beautiful days in between. So today I think we're getting up to 93. Um, so it's going to be a hot one here, but better than some other places that I know are having even higher temperatures right now.
yeah,
And we haven't been here for a while, so it's nice to see you. It's nice to be back with our friends here.
yeah. It's cool. It's been almost a month, I think.
I think so. We were supposed to be here last week, and then I went and had to get COVID. So, my apologies to everybody. We had to cancel on you last week. I'm back today, but you can probably hear from my voice. I'm not totally over it yet, but I'm getting there. So, thank you to everybody who sent well wishes as well. I appreciate that very much. So, it looks like we have some folks joining us. Mark, good to see you from Paris. We always enjoy having your commentary here. So, welcome. And we are, I think we should just go ahead and jump in. This is a big topic,
Yeah,
and
let's
it's
go
something
ahead.
that I've seen a lot of leaders struggle with. So I'm excited about talking through this today. All right. So today we are talking about how to prioritize customer experience efforts. As we walk through this, of course, drop in your questions as you have them. I will do my best to address all of the questions that we see. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeannie Walters. I am founder and CEO of a company called Experience Investigators, where we empower leaders like you to deliver on meaningful moments for your customers to deliver business results. We really believe in our mission, which is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by being here today with me, you're helping us live that mission. So thank you for all the work you do. We offer a lot of advisory services, training, workshops, speaking, all those types of things. Feel free to reach out to us through here on LinkedIn or YouTube, as well as through our website or anywhere else that you happen to find us. And if you haven't already, please sign up for yearofcx.com, where you can get all of our resources delivered to you for free. All right. So let's talk about customer experience. One of the things that I see a lot is that customer experience requires all this attention, right? We get all this attention around what is it that's happening with our customers? How can we understand them? How can we improve their journey? How can we make sure that we are really looking at where are those gaps between their expectations and what we're delivering? And then we discover all those gaps and we start seeing places that we want to improve. And the list gets longer and longer and longer. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed because customer experience is a team sport. We require a lot of interaction, cross functional collaboration to make sure that we are actually able to deliver on the things that we talk about for those improvements. And because of that, the prioritization of these things can be pretty tricky. What happens is maybe we have a leader who thinks their specific goals are most important. And so they want to make sure that those are the priorities. Maybe we have certain customer complaints that are rising to the top, but maybe that's only affecting a smaller group of the customers. So we're trying to figure out how do we prioritize where to put our efforts. None of us have unlimited resources, so this is a matter of figuring out where are we focusing our efforts to take the right action to get the right results and outcomes. It sounds a little more simple than it can be. So, what's happened is we want to make sure that we have that centralized view of our customer experience. And we want to make sure that we do collaborate on what are the priorities. And the only way we can do that is if we agree on how to prioritize. So today we're going to go over a method that we use, but I want you to think about what will work for you. You can do this step by step. You can also take parts of this and really move through and figure out, okay, we could use this method in this circumstance. There's no one size fits all here, but we really want to empower you to have the right tools to align your prioritization efforts to make sure that everybody is aware that you are taking the right steps in the right order to deliver on the results that you're looking for. So these are the three ways we're going to talk about how to prioritize customer experience efforts today. I would also really welcome feedback from you on what you do in your organizations because this can be done so many different ways. So, the first thing that we're going to introduce is this idea of a priority matrix. We'll walk through different ways you can use this, what's important, and how that can guide your efforts. We're also going to talk a little bit about voting and how that can play a role in really determining where you want to put your efforts and actions. And then, of course, we're in customer experience. We want to invite customers to help us prioritize. We want to make sure that we are inviting them into this process and listening to them about what's most important to them in these moments. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is a priority matrix. Now, this can be done either pretty informally or formally. And by informally, what I mean is sometimes you can, in the moment, create a matrix and say, okay, let's talk through this. Let's talk about where do these things go. What we're going to talk about today is actually taking that a little further and formalizing how do you get this feedback? How do you make sure that you're listening in the right points so that you can plot things on this matrix in the right way? So, this can also be something that is consistently used throughout your organization. It's something that if you have that CX team with a CX charter, hopefully, you can use this as part of your discussions, as part of a tool to make those discussions a little easier. And it also really is about making sure that the matrix is focused on the customer, your customer experience strategy. And if you have that mission statement and that success statement, you want to make sure that is highlighted here too. That's what's really going to be helping you align all of these different priorities. So, this is what the matrix looks like. So, you can see here that on the left axis here, we've got importance to employees, and on the bottom, it says positive impact on customer experience. So, that tells you a little bit about how to use this. Now, why do we talk about employees here? Well, we talk about employees because when we are doing anything inside the organization around customer experience management, we absolutely need buy in. We need employees who are going to focus their efforts on getting things done. And so, if you have something that the employees think, that doesn't matter, they're not going to put their effort towards that. They're not going to have that buy in for why they're putting in the actions around that effort. So, what we want to do is make sure that we are focusing on what is important to employees, asking for that feedback, getting that buy in. And then we also want to look at the positive impact on customer experience. Now, how do you measure that? Well, there are a couple different ways, right? We want to make sure that we're looking at things like our voice of the customer program. We're looking at things like how will this drive our customer experience strategy? We want to make sure we are meeting the needs of our leaders and our organizational goals. And then we also want to just, if we have that agreement between this is important to employees and we all agree that this will have a positive impact on customer experience, then that starts making those priorities rise up to the top. We have agreement from the employees. This is worth investing in. This is worth our efforts. And then we also have agreement that, yes, this will have a positive impact on the customer experience. This will help not only deliver the results that we want for our customers, but also for our organization. And then you can see here that your top priorities become that right upper square there. High importance, high impact. Once you start putting things into that box, that starts telling you this is very, very important. These are places where we want to put that effort. Now, sometimes what happens is you look at that list and you think, oh my gosh, there's going to be work around this for the next several years. You want to make sure you have a mix there of things that you can attack right away, as well as things that maybe require that longer term effort as well. Then you want to look at priority 2, high importance, low impact. This means that you still want to look at what is most important to employees that they are telling us they have buy-in for, and then maybe it's not as impactful to the customer experience, but eventually it will be. If your employees are telling you that, that's something to keep in mind too. Priority 3, low importance, low impact. And then, sorry, I'm saying this all wrong. So when we look at that high importance, high impact, that's where you want to spend most of your time. Then you want to move through this matrix and basically make sure that you are not spending a lot of time with low importance, low impact. So when you're looking at that box on the lower left, you want to make sure that you are kind of seeing that for what it is. Sometimes those can be the shiny objects. Sometimes those can be the things that look like, oh, yeah, we could do that. But if you look at it and think it's not really important to our employees, it's not going to have the impact on our customer experience that these other places on the matrix will, that's where you want to make sure that you're not necessarily investing in those things. So as you look through this, make sure that you're thinking about both of those ideas. Will we get the buy-in from employees? Is this important to them? As well as, will this have that positive impact on customer experience? Now, you can get that feedback from employees in a variety of ways. You can send surveys. You can do this within meetings. You can just simply check in with various leaders throughout your organization. There are lots of different ways to do that. But you also want to make sure that you're not just using one group, because if you use one department, what's going to happen is those departmental goals will actually rise to the top as important instead of that cross-functional view that we want to make sure we achieve. So one of the ways that I've also seen that can be very helpful with prioritization is to really look at voting, is to look at how can we actually include uh, people's opinions in ways that it's an election essentially. Now, if you have this cross-functional team, and this often happens, for instance, at the end of a journey mapping workshop, you'll have all these great ideas, right? You have all these recommendations of what to do. And then you get to that point and you think, okay, we've got 50 ideas. How do we actually prioritize all of these that we've all identified throughout this workshop are important? And this is where you really need to narrow your focus. You need to help people understand that you can't do everything all at once. So a good way to do this is to actually, there's some low tech ways, right? So if you're in that room after a workshop, what I like to do is have a piece of paper with one idea, and I always include why, right? What is the goal here? What would the recommendation do? So you have that, you have those all over the room, and then you say to every person, okay, we're going to vote with stickies. So we use these colored sticky tabs, and you get one red, you get a couple of yellow, and it depends how many you have, and maybe you get 3 green. And what that means is green means, yes, this is a priority to me. This is a top priority. I think we should put our efforts in this. Yellow means, well, if we did put our efforts in, then I would be okay with it, but it's not one of my top priorities. And red means, you know what? I do not think this is where we want to put our effort. And so what will happen is you'll start seeing greens collect on certain ideas. And that can tell you right away in a very visual, real-time way, you know what? These are important areas that we should focus on. Sometimes if you have 50 ideas and then you want to narrow it down, and then you narrow it down to 12 and you think, what are our top 3? You can take those 12 and say, you know what? Let's vote again. Let's do it again. But you can take away the reds because you've identified that those 12 ideas are really important, but you want to get to that top 3. So you keep narrowing down until basically you have agreement and alignment that these are really important priorities to invest our resources in, to spend our time in, and to put our efforts in. So this is where the importance to employees really comes in. We want to make sure we have that buy-in and that alignment in order to make sure that the efforts are going to be executed in the right way and to get those outcomes that we're looking for. So, of course, we want to include customers. Now, sometimes this is feasible, sometimes it's not, but Customers often will tell you priorities that surprise you, frankly. So let's say you come up with that narrowed list and you want to make sure that you are putting things on that matrix in the right place. You might present that narrowed list to your customers and say, what would you prioritize here? You might ask them through polling, through surveys. Sometimes customer advisory boards can be very helpful here because you can get that real time interaction as well. So you can do things like putting up all of these ideas and asking them to vote in a similar way or asking them to prioritize what is most important to them. And then you'll start seeing alignment between what's important to the employees and what's important to the customers. And if those things come together in a way that tell you, you know what, this is going to drive our customer experience strategy forward, this is going to deliver on the outcomes that we're looking for, and this is going to make our customers happy, then that clearly becomes a priority for your efforts around customer experience improvements. So there are all sorts of ways to do this, but several years ago, Starbucks made news with this because they created a website called My Starbucks Idea, and customers literally just posted ideas and they got upvoted or downvoted by other customers. And that helped Starbucks actually identify gaps in their experience. And that's actually how they created their rewards program. They heard from customers that that was very important to them. And it got upvoted by different customers. So if you have a customer community, for instance, you can use that and ask them to upvote or downvote different ideas. So there are all sorts of ways to include customers as well. But the important thing is when we look at where are we putting our resources and how do we know where to put our resources first, or how do we, where do our efforts need to be focused? If we have that alignment between the strategy of what we're trying to do, including what do our leaders care about, what does the organization care about, what do our employees care about, so that we can really get that buy-in moving forward, and what our customers care about, that's kind of the trifecta of what you're looking for these priorities. So again, when we talk about these things, I want you to think about this as if you're working on a large initiative, sometimes you can take this step by step by step and really get the right feedback, really get the right measurements, put everything in the right place so that you are prioritizing the right things. But if you are in a situation where maybe you finished a customer journey map and you have all those ideas, or maybe you are looking at customer feedback and you've got a list of 100 things that customers have suggested. When you're in those situations, use at least one of these methods because that will help you align together. It's a little bit of mix and match here. You can figure out what will work for you in the moment. So some of this is real time, but then you may want to take that next step and say, okay, let's present this to the customer advisory board. Let's present a survey to our employees and get their votes and figure out where all of this alignment really is. So it depends a little bit about where you are on your journey. But as you walk through this, consider using a priority matrix, starting with voting, and voting can be either low tech or high tech, depending on where you are, and then inviting customers to help in any way you can so that you continue to get that feedback from them. But the key here is it is very easy to get a little overwhelmed with all the ideas that come out of the work that we do. We want to improve everything for customers. We want to have that impact. So when we are looking at the efforts that we put in and the direction that we want our overall organization to focus on, we need to really help guide that prioritization discussion as CX leaders. Because otherwise, what can happen is that we can suddenly see that some of the things that we're spending a lot of time and resources and money and all of those things on aren't really part of that high priority uh, box in the matrix, right? Like we really look at it, we might think, oh no, this is not where we should be focused on. We need to guide that discussion as much as we can. And we need to help everybody understand that this isn't about departmental leads. This isn't about, specific goals around marketing versus sales. This is about priorities around the overall customer experience and how we can serve our customers in the best way. So, yet again, we are being asked to be advocates for our customers, to represent them in the best possible way. And sometimes that means having hard discussions about priorities. And these tools can help you have those discussions in a way that takes away some of the territorialism, the, things that can happen in business, the politics. And so that's my hope with these tools, is that you can use some of these ideas to really have those discussions, to guide your organizations in the right way and get leaders on board so that everybody understands why you're putting in the effort where you are, that you're prioritizing things that will serve not just the customer, but your overall organization as well. And then you can use these again and again and again. This is a cycle. You can go through and try again in 6 months, try again when you have your budget discussions, try, all of those things to make sure you constantly are checking in on that alignment around these priorities. This is not a clean, easy thing to do. And I will, say that right away. But when you have these tools, the other thing that can happen is that you can actually start creating something that you use in your CX team discussions. You can start checking in on these priorities and then accomplishing more on behalf of your customers. Otherwise, it's very easy to go from one shiny object to the next in this work. So I hope that these help you. I would love to hear how you are prioritizing in your organizations, because this is something that I see a lot of leaders have created really innovative ideas around. So I'm curious what you're doing as well. But as you prioritize, keep in mind your strategy, your organizational outcomes, and your customers. And if you can align all of those things, then that will really help shine a light on where you need to put these efforts. So at this point, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your questions, as well as, what are you doing in this world around prioritization as well?
Yeah, I want to start with a comment from Christopher that leads into sort of a larger question that I actually have.
Oh, great.
So Christopher says, importance to employees on the matrix should consider how far reaching across the org the
Hmm.
improvement will affect.
Hmm.
And so that makes me think about what we were talking about with asking employees to vote and asking for importance to employees. You gave the example of a meeting where
Hmm.
at the end we give everybody post-its, but what about those employees that aren't in the meeting?
Sure.
And even how do we determine who we're asking for feedback? Is it people who are directly affected, people who are indirectly affected? Um,
Yeah.
what are the permutations of that, and what are some best practices in terms of making sure that the right people are represented, the right people are reached,
Hmm.
and
Uh, yeah, I think that's a really important question that has about a million different answers, right?
of course.
Because when you think about how these efforts are directed, a lot of times it is that cross functional team. And so that could include leaders, that could include uh, different parts of the organization, like maybe you have customer service agents in there, maybe you have different people who are uh, interacting directly with customers. And so that team is usually where we start. But then if we identify certain actions that we want to take that include different groups or different employees, we want to make sure we get their alignment as well. And so typically that can be kind of a layered approach. So if you have that CX leadership team and you have a charter and you have all the things that you need, that's really where the governance of customer experience comes in. And so as you're prioritizing, you might need to get an executive sponsor, for instance, to weigh in and say, yes, that's correct. That's the right priority. And we will support that by getting this group involved. Sometimes you need that level. Sometimes you need to work directly with the leaders who are going to be the ones directing those actions, pull them into the conversation as well. And sometimes, if you're really looking for, hey, we're starting from ground zero, we don't know what to do, there's no harm in including as many employees as you can. Send out that survey to employees and say, this is what we think is important. What do you think is important? So work with your employee engagement group, work with your internal communications group, work with the people who interact directly with all employees throughout your organization, and see if you can come up with strategies to include as many as possible. So it really depends on kind of where you are in your own maturity journey, and what kind of resources you already have, as well as what your goals are, and as well as what kind of reach can you get. So there's no perfect answer here, but I think when we're thinking about prioritizing things like outcomes of let's say we got a bunch of customer feedback and we identified something, or we identified a bunch of different improvements we want to make. We want to make sure that whoever is making those improvements, whoever will be ultimately accountable and responsible for making that, we need to include them in the prioritization as well.
That's fantastic. We've got a question from Nadia. Nadia asks, if your customers are the employees, what are some great initiatives to improve CHS, customer health score, I believe, and
Mhm.
NPS, net promoter score?
Hmm.
I'm not sure if this is that the customers are employees within your own organization, or if
Mhm.
this is a B2B situation where you're working with employees of another organization. But Jeannie, maybe you can
Yeah.
interpret as you will and maybe answer both.
Yeah, I think, this sounds to me like maybe you have internal customers in, within your organization, which is very common. And I would apply the same things. First of all, it really depends on a lot of different things here. So there's no like perfect way to say, yes, improve NPS this way. But I would say that as you're looking at the feedback that you get, the more that we can, especially in situations where it's an internal customer, like we're all part of the same organization, we want to be really transparent. We want to make sure that there's high visibility about, we heard you and this is what we're doing about it. Because one of the things that happens is we tend to ask for feedback. We measure things like NPS or CHS, and we ask again and again for feedback, but then we never reveal to the people who are participating in that feedback, here's what we heard, here's what we're doing, or here's why we can't react to that. Sometimes within organizations, we have to say, we would love to be able to do that, but we can't. There are regulated industries. There are all sorts of reasons where sometimes we just don't have the power to change things. But being really transparent about that and continuing that as a two-way dialogue can really help people feel heard. And that alone can actually improve the scores eventually, because they feel like the scores are meaningful. What tends to happen in organizations is if people feel like nobody's listening anyway, the scores are going to keep going down because they don't see the efforts. They don't hear about the fact that they're in. And I magically muted. I'm not sure how that happened. But so that's one recommendation I would have, especially when you're talking about internal customers. And then when we're talking about B2B, it's very similar to that as well. We want to make sure people feel heard, and we want to make sure that it's visible, the efforts that we're doing. So as we're talking about priorities today, that's another area that we need to consider. How can we be transparent? How can we communicate about the efforts we're taking so that everybody's aware, so that people feel like, what, I voted for something that didn't become a priority, and that means that they must not care because I'm not hearing anything about that. We need to really explain, why are we taking the steps that we are, and why are these the priorities? So never lose sight of the why. That is so, so important in everything we do.
Jeannie, I'm the one who's supposed to mute myself.
No,
That's,
I know it's been a while.
that's
I'm
the way
I'm
this is.
rusty.
Yeah. I want to highlight a comment from Kimberly about collecting feedback. She says, we did feedback sessions with our frontline to hear
Mhm.
their voice, what was causing friction for their day. And they were able to not only speak on their own perspective,
Yep.
but also on the customer's behalf as well. I think that's something that we see a lot, and it's so great.
So important, so
Yeah.
important. And I love that you brought this up, Kimberly, because that is a resource we don't always tap into for some reason. I love listening to, what do you know, customer service agents? What do you know, salespeople? What do you know, cashiers? All these people who are dealing with customers day in and day out, they have rich feedback for us, but we have to ask. And sometimes we make assumptions about our processes internally, especially when it comes to customer support or customer service. We think, well, they've got codes, right? They tell us, and we read the reports and we see that, 4 out of 5 people had trouble with login information or something. But what we don't hear from that is actually it wasn't that it was really a problem with the login information. It was that they couldn't find what they were looking for. And so that's a different experience. Or maybe they had to call back for the third time about that very issue because we made an improvement that didn't really work for the customer. So all of those little tidbits are so important to get from those frontline people. It's so, so important. So that's a great opportunity as well. And when we're talking about prioritizing, they are rich with information. So including people who are working with customers is always a great idea, no matter what we're doing in customer experience.
Let's jump to a question from Mark. Mark says, when you are a people person like me, normal in CX, and you wish to obtain buy-in from a numbers person,
Mm,
maybe an analyst or a legal expert, how do you do it?
mhm.
How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. Oh, Mark, this is the battle cry of CX people, right? We have to figure out how to speak their language. And what that means is we have to connect with what is most important to them as a leader. And if they're a numbers person, we have a great case for numbers. Everything we do in customer experience provides value, but we have to explain that. Sometimes what happens is it's seen as soft, it's seen as why does that really matter? But if there's an obstacle in the journey for the customer, I would backtrack that and say, okay, what does that really mean? Well, if a customer can't get here, or if they have to put in too much effort here and they're telling us that this is too much effort and they're unhappy in this moment, by reducing that effort, by removing that obstacle, we're going to help them move through the journey to whatever that next step is. That's when you start looking at things like conversion. Now, conversion can mean a lot of different things. So when you look at what would happen if they move from one part of the journey to the next, does the likelihood of purchase go up? Does the likelihood that they will have a positive review go up? Does the likelihood of renewal go up? Those are the types of things that if you can translate that and say, you know what, this is why it matters to the organization. And this is why it should matter to you, chief financial officer or chief legal officer. That's really where you start getting that buy-in from those different leaders. We have talked about this before, but we use something called a customer experience success statement, where you literally break down what are the goals of all of your leaders and what are the goals of your organization, and how does that translate into customer experience work and how we measure our success. And so those tools can really help you get into that mindset and make sure that you are speaking their language. The number one thing we hear from leaders that aren't connected, that aren't aligned with customer experience is, why does this matter? It's soft, it's nice to have, but it's not a must have. But if you can paint the picture that if customer experience is done well, every single part of the organization wins. Every single part. You get higher return on investment. You get better word of mouth. You get higher employee retention, which is such a hot topic right now. When we do this well, it reduces service cost, it reduces costs of acquisition for customers, and it improves the customer lifetime value. The referral rate often goes up, all of these different things that add up to real results for our organization. We have to continue to talk like that when we are talking about these CX improvements.
And I want to highlight Camille says, the battle cry indeed.
Yes, yes, I hear you.
Love it. Um, closing the loop on Kimberly's original comment, she says, we discovered our own policies and procedures were the friction for our staff
Ah,
and roadblocks in being advocates for our customers, which is such a
so
great insight to be
it
able to
is.
uncover.
It is. And this is why it's so important, the work we do, because it's so easy to make these assumptions, right? Like our process maps look great. They
Mhm.
must be working. And until we really understand and listen to the customers, we don't really understand reality.
And I realize that you addressed this a little bit in your last answer, Jeannie, but Abdul Majid asks, how can we show the impact of improving internal process on the customer journey, specifically using lean, which is kind of that cycle of
Mhm.
identify, plan, execute, and review. I think I got that right.
I think you did. That's very good.
um, so is there a way to kind of work what you were talking
Mhm.
about into that methodology?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think again, it goes down to make sure you are articulating the goals and the outcomes that you're going for. Because if we're just talking about improving the customer experience for improvement's sake, that's not going to really make a case for anybody. So get really clear on the goals, not just for why would this matter to customers, but why would it matter to our organization? And once you identify those outcomes that could really drive your organization forward, then you can break that down into goals that, fit into those cycles that you can really just walk through and make sure that okay, we our goal is to improve this because of this, because it's going to drive this part of our organization forward. It's going to get this outcome for us. That's what we want to continue to talk about as we go through those cycles. And then you can also use the customer feedback cycle to really support those efforts too. Because once you make those improvements, once you aim for those outcomes, then you can check in with customers again and say, okay, did this work for you? And see what happens. That's when you start that wonderful cycle of gathering feedback, making improvements, gathering feedback again to making sure that those improvements actually did what you thought they would for the customers. And then you continue that throughout the customer journey because this is never done, right? It's never ever done. We have to constantly check in with our customers and we have to constantly look at how can we evolve within our organization through customer experience management to deliver better outcomes for our customers and our organization.
We've got a question that came in from LinkedIn this week. This one's from Faishala, who asks, I'm preparing a CX training. Preparing CX training materials for a financial institution. Can you advise what modules I should include in the training? This is a
Oh my
big,
goodness.
broad question.
Yeah.
Specifically for financial institutions, is there an area where you would recommend maybe highest priority
Mhm.
to start
Wow.
with?
I don't know if I can answer that in a straightforward way, but whenever I think about training around customer experience, I think about it going back to what we call the three facets of customer experience, right? So there's mindset, strategy, and discipline. And so in any organization, but I would imagine especially for financial services, uh, what we want to do is start with that mindset. We have to make sure that everybody understands when we're talking about customer experience, what are we really talking about? And how do we make sure we're all using the same language? And how do we make sure everybody here understands that it's not in addition to anybody's job, it's everybody's job. And at the same time, it's about the end to end journey. It's not just about, if I'm in sales, I don't have to worry about customer experience because that's further down the journey. That's not how the best organizations operate around this. We need to make sure everybody is on that mindset. Then you move into strategy. Why does this matter? And this is where financial services, I think this is going to be very important too. Why does this matter to our organization, to our leaders? Why should we care as a business about this? And then we've got the discipline of it. So, how do we actually execute this on a daily basis? How do we make sure that we are going to deliver on this? There's my dog. He just busted in here. Uh, and how do we make sure that we are tracking the right metrics? How do we make sure that we are really making sure that we are using the right tools. And what that means is sometimes we use different platforms to collect that customer feedback and look at the reports. We want to make sure we provide that context for the people. We want to make sure they understand those tools and the technology that we use so that we can really make sure that we are all kind of singing from the same choir book, right? So when you break it up into those three areas, it can help you provide the scope of what really is needed for your organization. And then I would also say that, in any organization that's more data driven, like financial services, we want to make sure they understand that, what, even with data, even with all the right tools, customers are emotional and our decision making is emotional. And so we have to not be afraid to talk about emotion as part of the customer experience. And in fact, the whole idea of customer experience is really that if we are setting the right expectations and living up to the promises that we make our customers, they will feel more emotionally connected to our brand and to our products and everything. And so that would be what I would argue is an important discussion to have in any data driven organization as well. The importance of emotion, the importance of really connecting with customers in that emotional way.
I can hear I can hear your voice wants to quit.
A little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah. Camille says, "Hello to Harvey."
Oh, I love that his name is Harvey.
Yeah.
Yes, he is he's a superstar, but he is clearly a little lonely and came up here.
Let's wrap it up with one more question, if your voice can handle it, Jeannie. This
Sure.
one's from Christopher. Always good to see you. Christopher says, in CX, we're experimenters. Often we're pursuing opportunities rather than removing issues. We're in uncharted territories. How do we prioritize opportunities that are,
Yes.
that fit into this category?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. So I really believe in this too. And we call it experiential innovation. This is a really important part of what we do. We have to innovate. We have to look beyond today and we have to take some risks, right? We have to figure out, like, hey, are they going to like this? So the way that I like to prioritize this is just like everything else. I ask myself, okay, if we innovate around this part of the journey and if we get this right, would the result be something that drives our strategy forward? Would this fit into that high impact, high importance part of the matrix? And if the answer is yes, then we understand that we are risking something for that reward. If we are just kind of pursuing different things because somebody else is doing it, then this is a good kind of gut check to think about, because I have seen that too, right? It's very easy to get lured away by what competitors are doing or what we see in other industries and we think, "Oh, that's so cool. Let's do that for our customers." But if we don't take that step back and think, "Okay, will this really serve our outcomes? Will this serve our customers in the right way? Will this live up to our mission? Will this deliver on the things that we've promised our organization? And do we have that buy-in for it?" Then it's going to be really easy to have a lot of stops and starts. And so that's where we need to really think about explaining it in this way too, and saying, we're going to experiment with this. We're going to get the feedback because that's going to be absolutely vital to knowing if it's going to work. And you start where you can. Sometimes it's a pilot program. Sometimes it's just starting small and then expanding something based on how it works. And so the more that we can connect the dots, then that's going to make a better case for why we need to experiment, why we need to innovate around the customer experience, because otherwise we can be left behind. And that's the last thing we want. So I would say, again, it's about how we frame it, how we make sure that our leaders hear this to know that we're not just trying something to try it. We are doing this because we believe that it's going to have that importance, it's going to have that impact, and that if this works, this is the reward that we're looking for. But acknowledge it's a risk. We're experimenting. Absolutely. That's part of business. We can't just do what everybody else is doing all the time. We have to experiment. We have to try new things. We have to deliver innovation on behalf of our customers. So that's a great question, Christopher. And it's always good to see you here. Thanks for being here.
I want to close with a comment from Rudri, who says the tools and processes that you're suggesting are so simple and basic, but absolutely brilliant. And it really fascinates me how big the impact can be.
That's so nice.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that really is the goal, right? To
Right.
simplify this. Jeannie knows I love to overcomplicate things. And I think that,
It's a skill. You're really
yeah,
good.
well, I think that, in leadership, it is really common to see. And so to be able to break things down and simplify them and present them in a way that we can actually do something with them, I think is
Right.
really important. On that note, what a perfect segue to remind everybody, we've got all sorts of resources like this, all sorts of tools designed to be simple but helpful at yearofcx.com. And in fact, we are about to publish our newest resource, which is a CX prioritization guidebook.
Hey.
You can actually go to bit.ly/CX priority to reserve that now, and we will email it to you as soon as it is ready. Coming out this month, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other notes on that stuff, Jeannie?
No, I just think, I love the comment that you shared about simplifying, because really we are put in this position all the time as CX leaders to really start kind of being on the defensive, right? We are being asked, why should we do this, from different leaders throughout the organization, from, all sorts of places. And we only have so many resources in any organization. And so when we are prioritizing, one of the best things we can do is simplify that process so that we get alignment. Because essentially, that's what we're looking for. We are looking for alignment to make sure that as we move forward together, we are all, you know, uh, delivering on that customer experience mission that is our North Star. And so, as you move through this, I just encourage you, first of all, yeah, do sign up for that guidebook that will be released in a bit. I think that will help you. And then also, don't be afraid to simplify. Don't be afraid to really, in the moment, use the low tech, right? Like these guys can really help you. And when you start narrowing that focus, suddenly things become more accessible, things become more doable. All of a sudden, you can start seeing the actions that you need to take. If there's too much, it's really hard to narrow that focus so that you know exactly what to do next. That's my hope, is that this will help you understand exactly what to do next. So, as always, it is absolutely my privilege to be here with you, and I so appreciate your patience as we worked through our schedule and my sickness and all of that. But I really love this community, and I think that as we move through this together, you all provide wonderful insights, and I want to thank you for that too, because as we've said before, this is something that there's no perfect way to do any of this. This is really about figuring out what will work for you in the moment with your organization, using tools that really put the focus on not just your customers, but your organizational outcomes, can really help you not just justify what you're doing, but lead in a different way. And that's my goal, is to empower you to lead that way on behalf of your customers. And David just dropped a link for about past webinars. We have, I think, more than 70 of these now that are available to you. If you are looking for a topic, please let us know. We're always interested in, what do you want us to write an article about next? What do you want us to do here together in our community? What do you need a resource for? Go ahead and let us know that. That's where a lot of these ideas come from, is this community and just talking to different leaders like you. So don't be afraid to drop that in.
And Jeannie, we did have a couple questions from folks about, will the recording be available? How can we access this later? And that bit.ly link that we've added has not only all of our past live recordings, but also new recordings like this one are simulcast live to YouTube in real time. So definitely subscribe over there, and every new video that we release, you'll automatically have access to.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. Yes. And yeah, let us know what you are looking for. We are always responding to you as well. So feel free to reach out to us. And thank you for being here. And these are all the different ways you can reach us. Feel free to drop a note here or reach out on LinkedIn, email, anything. If you have questions that you want me to answer during one of these sessions, that's a great way to do it too. But as always, my mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by being here with me, you are helping us live that mission. So thank you so much for all of that you do. And we will let you know when the next one is. I'm not sure we have that on the schedule yet, but our schedule is a little messed up, but we will let you know as soon as we have that out there. But in the meantime, keep doing what you're doing and know we're in your corner. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.